Hello, everyone. My name is Victor. I am the Occult Technician. And this is Mind War, Episode 8. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Mind War. To pick up where we left off, we are working from a book titled Mind War by Dr. Michael Aguino. Mind War was written as a strategy for peace on a global scale. We are adapting the tactics of mind war and applying them to our personal lives in order to overcome some of the difficulties that we may be facing. In the last few episodes, things got pretty technical. There was a lot of different tools and techniques that if you wanted to do further research on, it was a great way to gain increased knowledge for some very useful and applicable tactics to bring about peace in your life. It may sound strange to apply psychological operations tactics to your own life in order to bring about peace, but I believe that is exactly what will happen, okay? So we're going to pick up where we left off on page 115, and this is a section that I am very excited for. It's one of my favorite things to do. Section 9, Psychon, Hypnotism. Hypnotism, after the Greek god of sleep, Hypnos, became popular in the West in the 19th century as a consequence of interest in Asian meditative practices, for example, yoga. There followed a century of confusion and experimentation, both comical and sinister, as in the CIA's Artichoke and MK Ultra efforts to create amnesic assassins in a sort of Manchurian candidate. Opportunistic, therapeutic, and stage entertainment venues, often difficult to distinguish from one another, have been built up around it, and the claims for its efficacy are indeed mesmerizing. The reality is both less fanciful and more practically useful to the mind warrior. As discussed above, ordinary human sensory awareness is a combination of 95% unconscious impressions and 5% conscious ones. The result is a tsunami of sensations combining to create the individual's state of mind at any moment. By an effort of concentration controlled by either oneself, such as meditation or autosuggestion, or an outside source, a human hypnotist or EMS device, this state of constant confusion and distraction can be reduced to background noise in favor of a more dominant, constant, and attractive stimulus. The individual is not sent into a state of unconscious delta sleep, but rather into an alpha state of receptive relaxation. The hypnotizing visual object, sound, or other compelling stimulus becomes and remains the center of attention, and along with this attention comes a tendency to automatic compliance with it, or with any variations in it. Once again, the above discussed principle of resonance at work. Once the stimulus ceases, its memory will remain with the subject in varying degrees of influence. This is the actual principle behind audio-visual entertainment media advertising. Watching a television show induces an alpha state of relaxed belief and trust in what is seen and hearing. When the program shifts to a commercial message, it impacts that same alpha state, impressing itself on the viewer more effectively than possible were he or she to see or hear the same sales message while in a fully awake and critical beta state. Being in a state of hypnosis also allows for fraud on the part of both the hypnotist and the subject. The hypnotist can issue or give commands or give suggestions that he knows will not be obeyed subconsciously, involuntarily, but simply per the subject's alpha passive willingness to believe and cooperate. The subject responds for the same relaxed, willing reason, because to resist would require a return to the less pleasant, more demanding beta alertness. While the phenomenon of hypnotism means to the mind warrior, then, is simply that insistent, demanding, repeated messages or themes have a crowding out effect on the audience's ordinary mental sensation, and that, as Adolf Hitler observed in Mein Kampf, cited in Chronobiology above, a relaxed, tired audience is already alpha receptive to them beyond their intrinsic logic. The reason that I was so excited to address hypnotism is because part of the Gateway Experience tapes, one of the first tools that Dr. Monroe teaches you is how to become hypnotized. Hypnotism often has, based on what we just read, some negative connotations with it, of people being hypnotized to do things that they aren't aware of, or the type of hypnotism that we see being talked about here through television and commercials, right? But with the Gateway Experience tapes, hypnotism, I guess the best way to describe it is simply your body being in a deep REM sleep, with your mind being fully awake and being conscious to thought. It is a wonderful sensation. It is a sensation that is often void of pain. Your body, when it gets into this sleep state, I believe it pushes out chemicals to kind of not numb the body, but release it from receiving some of the pain signals that may normally be going on in your life, right? When you get into a state of hypnosis and your body is fully asleep, but your mind is still wide awake, it allows you to have conscious thought despite the demands of the physical body. A lot of us, we struggle with the demands of the body, things like hunger, things like pain. Those are often overtaking our conscious thought and driving us subconsciously, almost guiding us in a zombie-like state for more food or more sleep, or God forbid you are suffering from drug or alcohol abuse, right? Your body is demanding these chemicals, even though consciously we know that they are bad for us. When you're listening to the Gateway Experience tapes and you allow yourself to be put into this state of hypnosis, it separates those demanding bodily urges and functions and needs that are so demanding, right? And it allows us to think clearly, think consciously, maybe for the first time in a long time. Do not be afraid of hypnotism when it first begins to take effect as you listen to the Gateway Experience tapes. Outside of the Gateway Experience tapes, be cautious with any hypnotism that you might see in social media or online. I've watched several videos, even very short ones, that can put you into a hypnotic state and make you experience things that can be soothing. But again, as we read here, you have to be careful of who the hypnotist is, You want to make sure that you're not being targeted for commercial purposes, right? Where you are listening to some type of hypnotic message and they are subliminally trying to get you to purchase their products or believe in a message that is not something that you're interested in believing. Do not be afraid of hypnotism. Study it. And when you're ready and you do the Gateway Experience tapes, enjoy it. I promise you will. Number 10, Psychon, martial artistry. The important thing in the martial arts is not to win, it is to survive. The most vital techniques in Budo are those which preserve life. That is why the ultimate secret of the martial arts is said to be to win without fighting. Dr. Hatsumi, founder of the Bujinkan system. The Oriental martial arts are commonly regarded as the means of skilled physical combat, which indeed they are in their most conspicuous public image. If one takes the time and effort to study the ideas underlying them, however, a substantially different perspective emerges. That of combat as a last resort after resolution of a confrontation cannot be achieved nonviolently. This is not a question of argumentative skills, but rather of body language and a personal presence commanding and calming the tension of an encounter. This is achieved by sufficient education and training in both the physical skills and ethical philosophy of martial artistry. In a mind war campaign, phases 0 and 3, Metaforce teams will be on the ground in the geographic area in question, interacting directly with disputing groups and individuals. In Phase 4, parapolitics teams will be in the same setting, albeit with the threat of imminent physical war alleviated. In any of these situations, the presence and brandishing of physical war weapons would obviously be counterproductive. If carried, they should be concealed, and their display as a threat or their actual use is to be avoided wherever possible. The chances for such avoidance are substantially increased if all metaphysical and parapolitics personnel are trained and conditioned to react to confrontations as a ninja. So I personally have not practiced martial artistry, the martial arts, things like MMA, mixed martial arts, karate, kung fu. I personally haven't practiced any of those in any formal way, of course. But throughout the media, throughout podcasting, right, we hear a lot of talk about martial arts. And one of the things, as we just read here, is that one of the main messages, I believe especially through jiu-jitsu, is once you get past this idea that you are simply training in order to physically attack and be physically domineering to your enemy, once you get over that idea, you'll learn that the real core principle that is being taught through martial artistry is to, number one, avoid confrontation in the first place. Do everything you can to, again, avoid physical war. That's what we're trying to do here, right? But if it is necessary, often we hear that the best thing to do is kind of let your enemy burn themselves out. Use their momentum against them. Allow them to destroy themselves. Okay? We can take those tactics, we can take that mindset, and again, apply it to our own lives. If you are in a situation with family or friends or work, whatever it may be, and you find yourself coming up against several different issues that are difficult to overcome, we often find that if we simply allow those who are coming against us to continue the fight as we stand back and watch, they will eventually burn themselves out. Or they will end up damaging themselves and their reputation to such a point that they are no longer a threat to you. Right? Once you publicly begin talking about changes that you're making in your life, that your family and friends, again, they are not accepting of, and you see them start to lash out and act in crazy ways, it may be difficult to live through those type of situations. But again, what is happening? We are seeing them burn themselves out. They are giving themselves a bad name. Hold on one second. I think the echo is still on. All right, sorry about that, folks. The first part of this episode may have sounded like I was in a stadium. Maybe one day. If there is a stadium that I'm ever in front of, my guess is it will be a virtual one, not a physical one. Number 11, Psychon fields. As discussed in Psychon number 1, the human body is an electromagnetic machine. As such, it both generates and is enveloped by electromagnetic fields, controlling everything from heartbeat and respiration to sleep and female menstrual cycles. External to the human body, of course, are a great many natural and artificial electromagnetic fields. Some, such as the Earth's geomagnetic field, quite substantially larger. Both larger and smaller external electromagnetic fields may be weak or strong, and at every instance, each human within their range is subject to not just their several effects, but combined ones as well. Electromagnetic fields are subject to the principle of entrainment, which essentially means that a weaker field exposed to a stronger one will tend to align with it. And even a weaker field, if constant, may entrain a stronger but intermittent or irregular one. To understand the significance of electromagnetic fields to the human body, it is first necessary to appreciate that each such body is not an inert, static clump of permanent matter. It is rather an organic complex in a constant state of reorganization and reconstitution. This is interesting here, folks. For instance, the human liver and serum proteins are replaced every 10 days, and the whole of the proteins in the body about every 160 days. Moreover, these protein molecules are extremely complex devices, not mere raw material. Not even a single amino acid can be out of place in the replacement. So we're going to talk there for a second. Every 10 days, the human liver is replaced. Okay? So that means, again, if you are suffering from alcoholism, something that is very damaging to the liver, literally the second you stop drinking, your liver is going to start repairing itself. As long as you haven't done such extensive and permanent damage, I believe that there is a good chance that your liver will be completely restored. And the whole of the proteins in the body are replaced about every 160 days. So proteins are needed, of course, to create muscle. So even if you have allowed yourself to become weakened by lack of exercise, lack of strength training, you can know that within 160 days, those muscles will be uh, reconstituted, replaced, reorganized, and rebuilt through your efforts. Okay, this is a short period of time we're talking about. Give yourself 1 year to make change. And I promise you will achieve it. You just have to be focused. You have to be dedicated to it and do your very best to stay motivated throughout the process. Those things can be difficult, but again, with the tactics that we find in Mind War, it's going to keep you going. It's going to keep you working hard. To put it another way, there are about 60,000 billion cells in the human body. And every day, about 500 billion of these die and are replaced and rebuilt. Why? One possibility is that these molecules are so complex that they are inherently unstable and thus are continuously deteriorating. The metabolic system, including the liquid-based transmission of food and raw material throughout the body, is a raging furnace of consumption and regeneration. How does the body know precisely how to create each cell and molecule? It cannot be within the object itself because an object cannot organize itself. The answer lies in the existence of an entire layered network of electromagnetic fields throughout and within the body, altogether comprising a master plan electromagnetic field for it. Dr. Harold Saxton Burr, Professor Emeritus of Anatomy, Yale School of Medicine, named this the L field for life field. What exactly is a field? When something occurs somewhere in space because something else happens somewhere else in space, by no detectable means by which the cause produces the effect, the two events are said to be connected by a field. Well-known examples being gravity and magnetism. In the case of the human body, its organizing system cannot be chemical because then that system itself would be subject to the same entropic process. Hence, there is more to a human being than mere chemistry. It requires an organizing field, not merely an accidental accumulation of proteins. Thus, the notion of gene randomness is invalid. So I think what the author is trying to say here, that the regeneration of our cells on such a short timeline is not necessarily built into the cells themselves. It's not built and remembered just through our chemical makeup, through things like DNA. They also are affected by the electromagnetic fields that are around us. Organization inherently requires preconception based upon purpose. Thus, human physical existence has purpose. It is not accidental. The ancient Greeks identified this as the principle of telko or teleos, signifying the inherent end, function, or purpose of every phenomenon. Its most famous modern refutation is existentialism, which denies not only any purpose to individual entities, but indeed to existence itself. Anything that can organize must necessarily exist before what it organizes. DNA, for instance, contains building block codes, but not the plan or motivating force to organize an entire human body out of these blocks. So you can think of it as a giant bucket of Legos. They're all there, they're ready to be built, but they need a force behind them to build them, to motivate them. If life fields are a natural constant phenomenon, this would account for the general cessation of human physical evolution at least 100,000 years ago, and possibly much longer, as well as for the basic commonality of all human physical construction. Simple Darwinism is inadequate to explain the extreme complexity of higher life, such as development of such mechanisms as Darwin himself called evolutionary novelties, the eye and various complex organs. Additionally, any such novelties would have to occur simultaneously for the whole organism to work together. The odds against this are so high that evolutionists simply bypass the question. Where mind war is concerned, life fields are important because their preservation or disruption immediately, similarly, affects the humans within and controlled by those fields. Psychons number 2 and 3 discuss the electrical and magnetic wave phenomenon as separate variabilities. This Psychon number 11 focuses on the entire mix of fields, electromagnetic and life fields, defining, sustaining, and governing each human being, as well as groups of them, as extensive as the fields themselves. Identifying the field definition in each group and individual elements of its causing discord, destructiveness, or other negative social behavioral impulse can be positively corrected. Even more interesting to mind war is the theory that thought itself exhibits properties of a field phenomenon. So again, the author here is talking more about the overall culture or society that we live in, and understanding that the thoughts and belief systems that a culture may have can be thought of and calculated in the same way that electromagnetic fields can. And if they can be calculated, then they can be changed. Consider the ability to add 2 plus 2. Like the rest of the human body, the nervous system is also constantly disintegrating and regenerating. So the material of brain cells and connecting nerves may have been completely renewed about 100 times since an adult was first taught addition. As he hasn't been taught addition all over again 99 times, how does he still know how to add? This is a question not of mere memory, but of the structure of thought organization and integrity. The interaction and entertainment of such thought fields may account for individuals' ability to sense, emulate, or incalculate moods, impulses, desires, and fears in others, both individually and in mass. Just as life fields are distinct from the physical body, they create and organize. So thought fields are superior to and separate from the physical machinery that manipulate and use. That thought fields also have the ability to entrain life fields may explain the well-known phenomena of mental states affecting bodily harmony and health, and vice versa, as when bodily energy affects mental alertness. So, this is a scientific way to explain and talk about auras. We often hear that people can see the auras of other individuals. This is a way to scientifically explain how someone may be more empathic when it comes to the feelings and emotions of others. I often hear of people who, when they interact with others, are drained because they say they feel like they're constantly absorbing the life fields or life energies of others, right? This explains how when you are exhausted and tired, that you can start to feel depressed, right? These type of life fields play a very important role with our emotions, right? These aren't just chemicals that flow through our minds, these are also electromagnetic fields, right? In this model, therefore, the brain is properly seen as the mechanism used by one's primary and subordinate thought forms or thought fields for the cataloging of sensory input and the storage of memory. These are results, not the thing itself, of the self-aware thinker, the primary thought field, which is individual consciousness of identity and being. Sensory areas of the brain are more or less permanently wired to the respective physical senses. Hence, their injury or loss is quantifiable and somewhat irreparable. But learning and memory functions are not so localized as long as enough brain cells remain to be usable. These are used only intermittently and at desire or need. This is why memory is so subtle and elusive a thought activity. Memory is the backbone of one's current situation. It is how one conveniently decides who he is and communicates that to others. But it is still not the nucleus of the conscious self. It is this ultimate self which is the thing that assigns meaning and value to both memory and current sensations. I'm a man in search of his true self. How archetypically American can we get? Everybody's looking for his true self. We're all trying to fulfill ourselves, understand ourselves, get in touch with ourselves, and get a hold of ourselves. Face the reality of ourselves, explore ourselves, and expand ourselves. Ever since we dispensed with God, we've got nothing but ourselves to explain this meaningless horror of life. We're all weekending at or meditating for 40 minutes a day. We're squatting on floors in a communal om, or locking arms in quasi-Sufi dances, or stripping off the deceptions of civilized life and jumping naked into a swimming pool filled with other naked searchers for self. Well, I think the true self, that original self, that first self is a real, mensurate, quantifiable thing, tangible and incarnate, and I'm going to find the fucker. That is Dr. Edward Jessup. Here is another topic that if you have been following along in my art, know is very close to my heart. Number 12, magic. I bet you were not expecting that in a book titled Mind War, we were going to be addressing things like hypnosis and magic. That is exactly why this book is so important. It is not just a blueprint for peace on a global scale to deal with national and international issues. This is a book that is much closer to home. It can help us heal through our minds, bodies, and spirits. And that's why we work from it. Now we're going to address magic. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Star Wars. Magic, as studied and employed by professional magicians, consists not only of stage props and physical dexterity, but also of misdirection, deception, and sensory preemption. The effect, normally just for entertainment, is to make the seemingly impossible happen right before the eyes of an astonished audience. Less ethically and benignly, magic has been used by confidence men to sting their marks, by generals to overcome their enemies, by religious leaders to sway the credulous, and by politicians to get elected to office. Common to magic generally are these factors. A. Either control of the environment or adaptation of the magic to it. Only the simplest table tricks of magic can be done without regard to their surroundings. For most illusions to be effective, the complete environment in which they are activated must be controlled. Lighting, absence or presence of external noise, intentional distractions from close attention, audience alertness and receptiveness. While an illusion is intended to appear spontaneous, it frequently requires careful advance preparation out of view of the eventual audience. B. Establishment of the magician's dominant relationship. The magician displays a persona, dress, assertive speech, body language, pressured pace, eye contact, designed to seize and hold the attention of the audience, as well as to gradually but inexorably replace their wills and judgment of reality with his own. This is particularly essential to hypnotism. C. Dictation of the applicable elements. The magician identifies to the audience what objects, locations, and/or procedures are important and essential, restricting the problem to their interaction exclusively. The consequence of this is that an object's behavior, which might seem unremarkable or contrived against ordinary backgrounds or points to reference, becomes surprisingly and inexorable in this artificial environment. D. Definition of the variables. An object or procedure may be used in any number of ways, but the magician defines them so as to limit these ways to only those which make possible and reinforce the illusion, instruction, or behavior. Audience participation is desirable, since going through motions to supposedly produce the illusion suggests to the audience that it is somewhat responsible for it, thus encouraging belief in it. F. Limitation of possibilities. As he controls all of the objects and procedures variables, the magician can force the outcome of the illusion into one which the equally predetermined alternatives appear to highlight as miraculous. G. Channeling of expectations. Once in control of both the elements of the illusion and the audience's perceptions and willpower, the magician instructs the audience in what the possible outcomes of the illusion can be. It is now impossible for the objects or procedures to function in any other way, nor for the audience to devise or consider one. H. Interpretation of the result. Once the illusion is produced, the magician makes it clear to the audience what it obviously signifies. As in his initial establishment of control over the audience, he now implants, through announcement, emotional surprise, satisfaction, and body language, their presumably spontaneous reaction. And I, reinforcement of controlled perception. As necessary to establish the performed illusion firmly in reality, the magician follows it up with as many supporting devices and created impressions are as necessary. So, again, if you have followed along with my art, you know that the magic that I practice isn't necessarily the type of magic that the author is talking about here, right? He's talking more about stage magic, doing magic tricks, things like that. But these things, all of these tools that we just learned about, they can be implemented in your own life as you're practicing real magic, the magic that brings about manifestation, right? We can use these tools to not only be the magician, but also to be the audience. Okay? So the way that we do that is when we are preparing to do magic, when we are preparing our altars, and what we're going to do after uh, listening to the Gateway Experience tapes, after ingesting the psilocybin, after getting our minds and bodies into that hypnotic state. Once we begin to use the black mirror or the obsidian ball, once we begin to focus our intentions into our symbolism, right? We are using the same tools that stage magicians do. Just like you see behind me, the lighting. You see in front of me, the lighting, right? All of these type of things help set the mood. Again, think of yourself as the audience. Prepare your stagecraft, which is the magic. And you can get into a state of mind that you allow yourself to believe the illusion. Okay? And what is it that we're doing when we truly do magic? When we do manifestation and when we focus on our intuition? These are simply practices of our imagination. In order for you to become the successful person that you want to become, one of the most important things that you can do is imagine yourself already being the success that you want to be. Imagination and illusion can often be part of the same category. The imagination that you are envisioning is the illusion, right? But it doesn't mean that the illusion isn't real. It will be real at one point. Again, if you can't visualize it, if you can't imagine your future, you will never be able to build it. If the great builders of this world weren't able to imagine the buildings and the infrastructure like roads and bridges, if they weren't able to imagine those things first in their minds and see the illusion of them in their minds, the physical buildings would have never manifested. That's how this works, folks. Taking the time to set up your stage in order to allow yourself to be both the audience and the magician and give way to the magic. Give in to the magic. Allow the illusion to sweep over you. It's a wonderful feeling, folks. Don't be afraid of it. Beyond these basics, Mind War is most specifically concerned with the magical discipline of mentalism. This involves diversion of target audience perceptions and interpretations towards a different interpretation of their own thought process than the one which they would naturally experience. This is accomplished both through the above listed techniques of magic and appropriate activation, and blending of the previous 11 subliminal control psychological controls. Every possible external and psychological factor is controlled and administered to not only reconfigure the subject's thought process, but to leave undisturbed his belief that absolutely no such external influence is occurring. Obviously, suspicion of or alertness to mind control can alarm or panic an individual, even if the activity is, as the laws of mind work require, completely ethical and benign. The principles of mentalism may be studied in the literature of professional magic, and its power may be both experienced and applied in reputable institutions devoted to the art. While mentalism is never used within mind war operational activities to influence any of the planners or operatives, it permeates the entire manifestation of the mind war campaign within the problem environment and to all non-mind war onlookers. The original problem, if unsolvable, gradually and inconspicuously becomes one which is. Enemies are transformed into friends and allies. Apparently rigid deadlines become unfolding options. Borders become gateways. Hoarded assets become horns of plenty. Overall, problems become opportunities, and hatred becomes affection, tolerance, and compassion. Mind war is magic. Every mind warrior must therefore be a magician. We're tying all these things together, folks. It's comforting. Welcome it into your mind. These are new tools, new tactics that you have to look forward to learning, practicing, and implementing in your own lives. There's a lot to learn, there's a lot to practice. And like I said, it may take a year for these changes to take effect. Stay with them, stay focused, stay motivated, and together we're going to learn these tactics together. And we're going to apply them together to achieve the Aristos, the best possible scenario for our current situation. Number 13, religion. That is a topic we have addressed quite a bit throughout this series. So let's see how we can deal with religion, both on a personal scale, maybe just within your own home, or a religion within your community, if you live in a community and a culture that is dominated by one religion. The phenomenon of religion, primitive, pre-literature, pre-scientific humanity, found itself a conscious actor within a bewildering, complex, and mysterious environment. The earth obviously existed as it was perceived and experienced, but it did not explain itself. Why natural objects and processes are as they are was and still is unknown. Although both pattern thinking and the eventual onset of the scientific method at least enabled their substance, properties, and behavior to be recognizable and predictable. Again, when we can calculate things in our lives, we can control them. To address the why, humans could only fall back upon their imagination, creating one or more gods and accompanying creation myths. As humanity evolved, this practice branched into two general directions: metaphysics and religion. So again, very important here, folks. We are talking about our imagination. We used our imagination in the past to create the religions that we still deal with today. That imagination, that illusion, has been taught to the masses. And with the masses constantly focused on this illusion, using their imagination, they are manifesting these religions, the good and the bad. And most recently, in our current era, it seems that the religions have predominantly caused harm. So maybe it simply is going to be, again, that restoration of our mindset together, culturally, coming up with a new illusion that we bring about through manifestation through our imaginations. We can do it, folks. We can imagine a new culture. We can imagine a new way of living that is void of these ancient religions that have, in so many ways, outlived their purpose. Number one, metaphysics inspired the human intellect beyond the physical sensory syllogisms of the natural universe into a realm of super-rational abstractions. The Nibiru of ancient Egypt, the Pythagorean or Platonic forms, these principles were not identifiable through logic or reason, but through enlightened apprehension, what Plato referred to as gnosis. Cooperatively, such awareness was obtained through rigorous schools of initiation. Interesting. What kind of schools do we hear initiating people? Maybe secret schools that teach secret teachings? Number two, the vast majority of humans, however, are incapable and or unwilling to pursue or endure metaphysics. Hence, they either live their lives ignoring the why question, or they accept any one of several modern-day continuations of the original primitive superstitions of religion. We are dealing with that right now, folks. We are dealing with the masses who will spend their lives blindly following religions because they are too afraid to simply ask the question why and explore it on their own. They see it being much easier to just follow along, do what they're told, believe what they're told. It can be very scary to ask the question why. Again, as you have seen through my art, I unashamedly and without fear explore the darkness. The darkness that we are told to be afraid of. We are told to fear it. We are told that it is evil and something to stay away from. It is that fear that keeps you confined in these systems of slavery, the systems of religion which are tearing us apart with their fake morality, which does nothing but damage the human psyche, destroy our culture and society, and tears us apart. We can do better, folks. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to dive into the darkness of the abyss and ask the question, why? Do it. What do you have to lose? Within religions, the why is simply assigned to the whim of one or more gods, hence inexorable. However, it was and remains exploitable by persons and organizations wishing to control others by claiming to represent or interpret these gods' images. The propaganda is simple. Reward for obedience, punishment for disobedience. both in organic life and in a promised or threatened hereafter. Such exploiters feel no obligation to explain or justify their actions. The masses are expected to take them on trust alone and on the vernacular of faith. As Robert Anton Wilson quips, theology was a system for explaining things by coining words which nobody could understand and pretending that the words meant something. It's very clear there, folks. The author is not holding back. Religions as we know them are simply parlor tricks, ancient stories, and mind war tactics that charlatans use to control you through fear and hatred. Collectively, we should condemn them for their actions and for what they do. We should shun them. We should force them out of society for what they're doing. It's unacceptable, and it should no longer be tolerated. Religions invariably represent themselves as forces for good within the community, but the worldwide historical record shows quite the contrary, that they have consistently been invoked and exploited for destructive excesses, war, genocide, torture, and enslavement. This was the most blatant during the Dark Age, from the Christian Roman Empire and the Crusades of the 17th century. After 1550, tensions between Catholics and Protestants had reached the stage of religious warfare, culminating in the terrible 30-Year War between Denmark, Sweden, and the Protestant German principalities on one hand, and the Catholic Habsburgers, Spain, Austria, Netherlands, Italy, and the most Catholic, Germany, on the other. France, though Catholic, fought alongside the Habsburgs for secular political reasons. Approximately one-third of Germany's population died from the war, and the final Peace of Westphalia in 1648 was brought about more by exhaustion than by genuine reconciliation. We are moving out of the Dark Ages, folks. We are moving out of the age of Pisces and into the age of Aquarius, into the age of enlightenment, into the age of growth and healing, prosperity, and positivity. We see it. We see it happening. We can look back on the last 2,000 years and see the pain and suffering caused by these religions, causing brother to fight against brother for ridiculous stories, ancient fables that have no place in our current lives. We see the age of Aquarius being dawned simply through our information age. No other time in history have the devices of information technology been available to us the way they are today. This is an age of information. This is an age of enlightenment as we move forward. And we must free ourselves from the shackles of religion. We must free ourselves from the fake darkness, from the darkness that they try to implement onto us, the darkness that they try to suffocate us with. It's all lies. It's all unnecessary. It's truly sad what we've seen over the last millennia. What we've seen family members do to other family members. The wars throughout Europe were so unnecessary. Not only the ones of the past, but the ones of the most recent past. Even the wars that seem to be continuing today. brother against brother. Simple divisions marked in the sand. Simple divisions brought about by the inability to understand each other's language. These arbitrary borders, these divisions are being erased through the age of enlightenment, through the age of Aquarius, because of our technological advancements. And as mind warriors, we are going to take advantage of those technological advancements to bring about peace. That is our goal. We are going to achieve the Aristos not only in our own lives, but worldwide. It starts on a personal level. You have to achieve the Aristos in your own life, the best possible scenario for your current situation. Right? Once we know that, once we have a clear understanding of our battlefield, then we can begin the healing. The subsequent enlightenment and age of reason resulted as much from popular revulsion over the horrors as from the appearance of the functionally aesthetic social contract political theorists like Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Since then, and this is a crucial realization for the mind warrior, religion in the Judeo-Christian West has become a mere psyop by the power elites, with no one except the uneducated masses taking it either literally or seriously. Ritualistic piety abounds. Practical compliance with it is irrelevant. The author is very clear here, folks. The culture that is forced upon us here in the Judeo-Christian West is a psyop by the power elites. They use it to control you. And I promise you this, the leaders of the political system, the leaders of your corporations, and the leaders of your religious systems do not believe what they preach. They use it to control you. You got to wake up, folks. We can't do this for much longer. The age of enlightenment is here. The age of Aquarius is upon us. It's time to open your eyes and move away from the darkness that is imitation, the imitation darkness that was forced upon us for the last 2 millennia. B. Internal religious psyop, the Army Chaplain Corps. Our Father in heaven, before we go into battle, every soldier among us will approach you each in his own way. Our enemies, too, according to their own understanding, will ask for protection and for victory. And so we bow before your infinite wisdom. We offer our prayers as best we can. I pray you watch over the young Jack Jehogan that I lead into battle. You use me as your instrument in this awful hell of war to watch over them, especially if they're men like this one beside me, deserving of a future in your blessing and goodwill. Amen. Oh yes, and one more thing, dear Lord, about our enemies. Ignore their heathen prayers and help us blow those little bastards straight to hell. Amen. Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore, in the post chapel before leaving for Vietnam. We Were Soldiers, 2002. Although pro forma, the mission of the Army Chaplain Corps is to advise commanders concerning soldiers' free exercise of religion, in practice, it has a foretold de facto mission. Number 1, to convince soldiers that their religious faith should not stand in their way of killing other humans on order. Number 2, to reassure soldiers that God is on their side in a war, even if it is against other humans professing faith in the same God. Number 3, through these first 2 missions, to minimize or dispel soldiers' fear of death in combat. And number 4, to ensure that soldiers' families do not compromise the first 3 missions. To reinforce this agenda, chaplains are commissioned as uniformed officers and are dependent for both retention and promotion on their secular commanders' evaluations. Those who find they cannot reconcile combat missions and orders with their faiths either resign or are removed. The facts are not mentioned or gratuitously embarrass the chaplain corps, but rather to simply acknowledge its critical physical war function. Doctrinally, Judeo-Christian religions prohibit the killing of humans who have done nothing to deserve it, and the physical war U.S. Army to function, it must order and rely upon its soldiers to carry out such orders. The individual and mass killing of government-declared enemies. After World War II, much sanctimonious publicity was given the so-called Nuremberg Principle, that soldiers could not use obedience to orders to justify destructive actions, which others might later label war crimes. This principle was applied exclusively to the vanquished Axis, however, and others have since never regarded it as a valid objection to individual soldiers. The result of this official institutional hypocrisy is a cancerous erosion of the U.S. Army's honor and integrity, which, because of this nation's original and traditional stand on behalf of individual ethics, are absolutely indispensable to it. Once the American armed forces evolve from physical war to mind war, arbitrary killing of enemies will cease, and the need for chaplains' psyops of service personnel will evaporate. The implied coercive commissioned chaplains corps will be discontinued to be replaced by civilian clergy with no physical war enforcement agenda. The lies of religions, the lies of the superiority complex of your religion are being used to sanctify your killing of the so-called enemy in physical war. If the military is able to do this to their own soldiers, what are the religious leaders of the civilian population doing to the masses? How are they using the Judeo-Christian philosophies of the West to coerce the masses to do all sorts of things that actually go against the religions that they're preaching? We see it today. Judeo-Christian religions are simply a facade. It's just as fake as the makeup that you may put on your face. They're just as fake as the fancy clothes that you put over your unhealthy bodies. We see through it. It's unnecessary, and it soon will become unwelcome. It will not be tolerated because it is these type of religious practices that are tearing us apart. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Mind War. This is episode 8. Take a moment to please visit my Etsy page. The links are in my bio to Victory Work LLC. There you're going to find all kinds of cool hoodies, sweatshirts, long sleeve t-shirts and stickers. Any purchases that you make through my Etsy page, any of those profits go directly back in to the operation that you're seeing today. It helps me continue to do my art and continue to do these videos for all of you. I appreciate every one of you. I appreciate you coming and giving your attention. It really means the world to me. So many of you have been reaching out and telling me how much you appreciate these videos, and that's why I do them, folks. If you're out there listening, if you're out there implementing the mind war tactics in your personal lives, then I have succeeded, right? Please reach out to me if you have questions. I'll be glad to work with you. Thank you so much for being here, friends. Sincerely, your friend Victor, the Occult Technician.